question, just to kind of get you in the mindset again, question around how many women you did reach with the survey and what you're doing differently in the new one to make sure that you're increasing the percentage of women responding.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So we reached around a third of our respondents were women. And we noticed, I mean, it's a bit hard to tell because we actually noticed that sometimes we had a male respondent initially, so we coded the person as male. But then because we ran the survey over a whole month, asking 2 or 3 questions each week, sometimes we would suddenly then in the second or the third week hear a female voice saying, oh, I'm the wife of this person and I want to tell you this and that. So sometimes there was a shift from a male to a female respondent as the survey went on. And I think that was also partly already related to the first thing that we do differently now, which is, I think just running the survey a bit longer makes it more likely to hear more female voices. That's the first thing that we're doing differently. The second thing is to much more explicitly say in our introductory message that we want to hear from women. We also now have questions that are, for example, questions around security, where we very clearly ask about women's experiences of safety and how they may be different from men's experiences of safety. And I think that's really important because from our first survey, what we could see is that sometimes women would answer and say, oh, you know, my husband is out at work and he'll reply to your question when he returns. And that already reveals that they had an assumption that they weren't supposed to answer those questions. So I think better labeling and making sure that in the introductory message, but also in the questions, we very clearly say we want to hear from women is very important. Yeah, so I think those are the 2 ways in which you can very easily increase the female response rate.
Fantastic, thank you. When you were saying, when you were reflecting on this, it made me wonder whether you do any A/B testing on the survey. And for colleagues who are on the line who might not be familiar with that concept, so it's basically slightly changing the wording, slightly changing the formatting, the coloring to try and increase higher engagement rates of any kind of digital platforms. And I hope I kind of just portrayed that correctly. But did you do any kind of, sending one set of questions to one community and a slightly tweaked wording to another community to see if you get higher response rates of women or anything along these lines?
We didn't do it directly, as in we didn't do it within one survey, sort of sending it to different sort of groups. We did do it in terms of when we did the second survey, we incorporated some of the lessons learned from the first one. I think, one of the things we did is we had the assumption, which turned out to be correct, that sort of a female voice would maybe be more, would maybe elicit more responses. So, in our introductory message, we had Sarah who said, hi, I'm Sarah from UNDP and I'd like to ask you some questions today, as a way of also making the survey less formal, so that it's less sort of seen as a bureaucratic measure, but more as a more informal way of seeking communication between UN organizations that can be seen as more removed and people on the ground. So that was one of the things we did. We sort of tried female voices as a way of getting more responses. We also sort of tried sort of individual follow-up, which made a huge difference. So usually with WhatsApp, we would use broadcasting lists because for a big sample, you cannot individually send each question. It just takes too long. But we did then for some questions, we experimented, okay, how can we improve the response rate by doing individual follow-up? We would sort of ask people, oh, it would be really great to hear from you today. Have you received our question? And that made a huge difference in terms of increasing the response rate. But yeah, we haven't done it as systematically in terms of creating 2 different groups and then sort of tweaking a bit to see how that changes things.